Right, so hello everyone. We got Robert here today, who has joined us as a sales professional, a person with a lot of experience in sales. He's based in Madrid, and he's been quite around in the localization world, and I'm happy to have him here today.
Super, thank you for having me. Delighted to be here.
Great. So we wanted to talk about sales and also particularly about sales in relation to artificial intelligence. So, but perhaps let's start at the beginning.
Sure.
You're working in sales now, but how did you get there? What is your path? How did everything start? Because there's no career which is called sales, is there?
No, and I guess even more specifically, working in sales in the translation and localization industry is something that I fell into. Like many people, I guess, in the industry, maybe including yourself, it was maybe started by a love of language and an interest in languages and culture. I was always into languages, different cultures, the whole concept of Europe, visiting places like France and Germany. And of course, I grew up at a time where, in rural Ireland, at a time when Europe was very influential. We were receiving a lot of funding from the European Union, and it was seen as a very commercial thing to learn different languages. So I was good at languages. I studied French and German in school, and I decided then to continue that in university. And in university, I studied at the University of Limerick, in the southwest of Ireland, very close to where I'm from. And as part of my course, I did a couple of modules in localization, which was, a new concept for me at that time. And because I had done those modules, I guess I was seen as, somebody who had studied localization in college. I guess I was one of the first generations to actually study this formally in some kind of curriculum or syllabus. So I ended up, after graduation, I should say during the course, I spent time in France and Germany. And then after graduation, I went back to France to work initially as a technical writer, which for anybody who knows how I write now or how I speak now, I'm probably not the most concise person, and certainly not very technical. So it wasn't really the right job for me. My first job was actually with a company which in future versions or in future acquisitions is now part of the Acolyte Group. And they hired me and some colleagues specifically to work on site with a big telecommunications company. So literally writing documentation in English for telecommunications machines, so the GPRS and the machines that allowed us to send text messages and send data via telephone. And of course, I didn't understand any of this. It really didn't suit me. So I didn't stay there for very long. But I came back to Dublin then to continue my career and do some different things. And I ended up answering a job advertisement. They were looking for a telemarketing person, or what was called telemarketing at that point. These days you would call it a sales development representative, a lead development person. So I got the interview and I got the job. It was with a company called simultans, which was one of the earlier localization companies as well, based in California and Dublin. And I went from there. Yeah.
So simultans, they were acquired at some point, weren't they?
No, I think they're still very much independent. I don't think they were acquired. I believe the owner and his wife are still there. As far as I know, it was Mark Homnack was the CEO, at least when I was there. They're still in Dublin. And I remember on the first day, practically, my role was literally to get on the phone and call prospective customers on behalf of the company, find out if they had translation requirements, and keep them talking, try to communicate with them and create an opportunity for the company.
You still call people today? Because I think this has gone down really in the last 20 years, you know.
It's very difficult. It's very difficult. I mean, who answers their phone these days? You know, even to the people that we know and we like talking to, you know, we've entered into a convenience of replying with voice notes or text messages, you know, and typically, certainly if we don't know the number, we're not very much inclined to answer the phone, you know, particularly those who would like to avoid things. So, you know, it's very difficult to do cold calling these days. However, it still has a place, right? If I'm a business developer and I really want to get through to somebody at a company, I'll make the effort, pick up the phone and try to get through to somebody, even so I can say, hey, I spoke to your colleague, or I spoke to the receptionist, or somebody told me to call you back, you know? It's always good to have a bit of a referral. But of course, yeah, it's very difficult. It's very difficult.
How do you spot a great salesperson? Let's say you're interviewing for salespeople. Let's say you have a company and you know, you want business developers. What are you looking for?
Personality, people who can relate to other people, people who clients and prospects are going to enjoy talking to and spending time with. I'm a big believer in people using their personality, their humor, their unique charm. Of course, they have to have a good work ethic as well. They have to have a lot of perseverance and I guess a kind of a single-mindedness, you know, because there's a lot of rejection in sales as well, and they have to have a thick skin in order to be able to cope with that.
Thick skin,
you know?
Yes.
So, you know, not to take rejection too seriously or too personally is very important. These days, of course, as with all of the jobs in our industry, there's like a long list of additional skills that we need, right? So you need to be, you know, organized, methodical, have a system, develop your learning, develop your skills, you know, learn different techniques and negotiation skills, questioning skills, being able to put together solutions. There's a lot of things that you can teach people. But if you were to break it down in terms of identifying raw talent, I think personality, the ability to communicate well, you know, and a motivation, a single-mindedness to achieve a goal, really, you know. Because the other things you can kind of teach and coach. You know, you can teach process. You can teach people how to present, you can teach people how to question, how to identify a lead or a contact, you know? So, I like people with good personalities.
Yeah, I agree. And can you perhaps, you know, tell an anecdote of a really difficult situation you were in and, you know, what happened?
I mean, I've been in plenty of situations. I've been on, you know, I've done the whole missing flights and having laptops stolen from train stations and talking to translators when they're at somebody's deathbed, you know, or customers disappearing without paying their bills. You know, it's been a colorful journey. You know, sometimes you have difficult conversations. You find yourselves in meetings where you really don't know what's going on, or you find yourself with people who are very hostile, or, you know, you miss your flight, you miss your passport, everything goes wrong. And again, I think you just have to be resilient and kind of bounce back and keep on going, you know. You know, there's an expression in English which is water off a duck's back, you know, so the water rains and it splashes off your back, and so you have to be a little bit like that, you know.
Do you think this is something you can learn, or is it, you know, you have to have it in your blood?
I think you can learn it. I mean, I look at me, for example, as a kid, I think I was someone who was very shy and retiring. I liked books and languages. You know, and then as an adult, I realized that maybe I was more sociable than I thought, you know. So you can definitely learn how to engage with people and not take everything so seriously, you know. All you can do is do your best, right? In any kind of job or situation, you know, you have to have the best intention and, you know, do your best in the moment, you know, make the best effort that you can, and then let the rest go, you know, control what you can control.
And how do you, have you actually ever worked in production? Have you ever had a translator role or DTP? Or
not really. I feel like I have, because I've been in the industry for so long, and so I feel like I have an awareness and a sympathy for, you know, what people do. Of course I haven't been a project manager. Working for the larger LSPs, though, you get very involved in putting together solutions, as we call them. So these days, of course, a translation or localization buyer, particularly on the enterprise level, is a lot more sophisticated, a lot more demanding. They want programs or solutions which comprise language quality and technology, and maybe there's copywriting, maybe there's SEO, maybe there's automation or KPIs and data reporting. So I've been very involved in talking to the customers, trying to interpret and anticipate their needs, and then put together, bring together people from different parts of the company, right? So you might have a pursuit team, which would include, a program manager, a project manager, an enterprise technology expert, a vendor manager who's managing the resources, a quality person. And as the business development person or the solution provider, the person who has to provide the solution to the client, you kind of have to lead a lot of these people and kind of keep everybody focused on what we're trying to do for the customer, And some customers are very vocal about what they want and they know exactly what they want, and others you're kind of, you're leading along, sometimes you're pushing along, and sometimes...
You prefer the ones that know what they want or the other ones?
Good question. I guess it depends on what you can deliver to them, because different companies have different capabilities, and some people you can impress easily, other people are a lot more, I guess, skeptical and cynical, right? And in the translation and localization industry, particularly when you get to enterprise companies, there's a lot of stakeholders. We talk about a circle of influence. So you'll have the person who is evaluating, the person who is reviewing translations, the person who's reviewing the pricing, the finance people, the localization manager. You might have 5 or 6 people who are evaluating your company at a time. And it's difficult to have authentic conversations with all of those people and really understand what they're thinking so that you can then anticipate their needs and give them a solution. In smaller companies, it's also difficult because you might have buyers who are relatively immature and they're looking for the lowest price or the fastest translation or somebody who can make things super easy for them and make problems disappear, right? So it's certainly, it feels like it's a more complex landscape and a more complicated industry in which to sell these days, Expectations are higher, the client sophistication is higher, the price point, of course, keeps on dropping, and so it's challenging.
And I think also because it's a service industry, it's you're selling something invisible.
It's intangible.
It's intangible, and you have to, you have to create the perception that you're going to deliver a perfect service to the customer, no?
Yeah, and this is where having knowledge of the production system or the nuts and bolts of the end product is very helpful, particularly these days when you have to really be able to articulate the value. If you're going to charge for X number of languages or X number of hours, or it's a monthly retainer or whatever it is, you really have to be able to articulate the value you're providing and also how you're providing better value, because we operate in a very crowded space, right? The names and the labels, the logos change, but it's still very, very crowded, and many people selling similar offerings. I think the results have shown so far that these technologies are really good at doing some kind of translation, but we still need our reviewers, our quality checkers, our people who have the authority to know whether something is perfect or suitable for publication or not. And I guess for me the worry would be is that if we get too dependent on these things, where is the next generation going to find, where are they going to get the experience to be able to be those judges, those quality gatekeepers, because the translators that we work with in the industry, many of them have been in business for 10, 20, 30 years. It's a vocation for a lot of them, and you can't build up that experience in a matter of days. So I worry what the net is going to be from that kind of quality perspective.
Yeah, nobody knows really. I was in a webinar this morning with technical authors, and they have the same worry. ChatGPT is able to create content.
Yeah.
It's going to get better and better.
Yeah.
So their job function will also change. They will not type any more text. They will not create text. They will, review text that has been created by the machine. So it's the same.
Yeah, and I guess we always have to bring it back to what are we trying to achieve, So if I'm a software development company or a consumer product company, they're going to use these technologies in different ways, right? So I guess we will be coming up with new and kind of original ways of using the content as well. I think the problem that we have these days is there's so much noise everywhere. There's so much content. There's so much advertising. There's all of these different platforms, all of these different media types. Our attention is being pulled and dragged in so many different directions. I think that noise is very dangerous, and distracting. We talk about deep work. Do people, do they do deep work anymore? Do they turn off their computers and just work for hours on end and get lost in their work? I don't know if they do.
That's a thing of the past, I think. There's so much distraction.
Yeah, and meetings, and even, I guess we always had the objective of managing other people, but now so much of it is done over the phone and webinar and daily check-in calls. There's a lot of distractions.
I think with AI, what's going to happen, or what could happen, is that sort of the best ideas win. So it could be our industry in particular, could be an idea economy, where suddenly small companies can get an edge over big companies, which is it's a big story. You want to climb up the ladder, you want to become get more revenue, get more customers, and AI could give small companies the edge to do that more easily, I think, because they're more nimble, they have less restrictions, they have less hierarchies, they can, air quotes, do what they want, and perhaps overtake larger companies.
Yeah, I mean, it all boils down to the people, doesn't it? Your company is always the people that it's made up of, and so if those people are able to harness the technologies that are out there, and I guess use them for a specific audience or specific market, and that's key, right? Because I think we've seen that these days there's so many generalist companies. It's only by specializing in something very, very clear and creating your specific offer for a specific market that you can really get a high level of customer intimacy and differentiate yourself. So if they have a specific market in mind, like whether it's, I don't know, green energy or doggy toys, whatever the specific niche is, if they can put themselves in the place of that buyer, that market, then that's where they'll be able to add value.
So in terms of industry trends or strategy, how do you keep up to date with that?
Like everybody else, I read the industry news websites, the consultants' websites, LinkedIn, of course. Again, there's a lot of noise. You have to pick and choose. And the localization industry is great at talking about itself. We have a lot of conferences, a lot of organizations and groups. So there's a lot of conversation. It's not difficult to catch up with things. And of course, the same topics. At the moment, it's ChatGPT. Before it was MT. Before it was TMSs. The same themes stay around for a long time. So they don't disappear overnight. And we certainly, the other thing about our industry, particularly on the client side, is there's a huge amount of churn. So your buyers this year are not necessarily going to be the same buyers next year, particularly if they're not in localization functions.
I thought staff attrition was a thing of the agencies. Or you're saying it also happens on the client side?
Oh, of course. On the in the agencies, of course, we know our project managers get burnt out very quickly.
Yeah, they do.
Particularly the production people. But on the client side as well, I think in a lot of cases, in e-commerce situations, in marketing teams, in product development, you even saw all of the redundancies in recent months, right, in the IT world. So the churn is always happening. And then new people come along, and there is an institutional knowledge that is retained. And of course, there's a lot more information out there that people can access, but there's still like a re-education of the new buyers again and again and again, So it's a bit like, you know, the Finding Nemo situation. They forget, you know, or people forget they need to be retrained. And in that sense, you know, we're still talking about the same things we talked about 20 years ago, like quality, time, cost. Okay, there's a few new things thrown in, but the main topics, I guess, are still there.
And with all the potentially possible paths in the localization industry, what advice would you give a person that's coming out of university?
Good question. I would say, well, again, depending on their personality and what their interests are. You know, some people love translation and take great pride in providing translation quality. Maybe they may be, you know, less extroverted potentially, or they just enjoy working on the text. You know, for other people, I guess I would say, you know, get really good at something, whether it's, you know, project management or sales or, I don't know, DTP or whatever it might be. And as soon as possible, I would say, try to start managing other people. Because essentially that's what companies want. They want people who can lead teams of people or, you know, solve solutions for companies. And so having management experience and bringing people along with you is really important. But of course, you have to have your own experience first of all, before you can lead others, you know. So I think getting really good at something or developing your own niche and then trying to share that niche with other people would be a good bit of advice. Again, these days there's so many paths that people can take. That's going to continue. There's probably going to be even more paths in the future. You know, we don't know what we're going to be localizing in 5 years' time. Whether it's going to be self-driving cars or virtual reality chat rooms or, I don't know, gambling from, you know, electronic glasses. You know, we don't know what we're going to be dealing with. So the niches could be endless.
Yeah, that would be my question to sum it up a little bit. Where do you see the localization industry going? Because it used to be, you know, the classical things, you know, technical documentation, you know, patents, contracts, and then it has moved on to software in the 90s. What's going to happen in the future? What content will people actually consume? I mean, mass content.
Yeah, I think we don't really know. I mean, we can see the move to audiovisual is happening, and we're going to see more audiovisual. We're going to see more robots. You know, so all of these robots are going to have interfaces and API documentation and apps controlling them from our phones and all this kind of thing. I think the content types, it's going to be really hard to predict. Like, we're going to have more virtual reality, more kind of human-computer interaction, I guess. And those are things that, you know, are probably out there right now, but we don't necessarily have them in our day-to-day all of the time, you know. Although we're increasingly interacting with the robots, right, through, you know, the personal assistants on the phones or Alexa or whatever it might be. So we're seeing a lot more of that, right? How is it going to affect our industry is a good question, because I think we will continue to see a lot more diversification in one sense. So there'll be opportunities to specialize in different fields, definitely. It'll be interesting to see how things, you know, evolve on the production side of things. So will we be able to use more AI to make things happen faster, more cheaply, more with less human error? That'll be an interesting journey, and to see how people manage projects. You know, it's one thing when you're working in a single company and you have your different content silos and you have a CMS system and it's connected to a TMS and there's like an established defined workflow. But when you're in an LSP and you have to deal with 50 or 100 different client accounts, you're still going to need those people to, whether it's managed by exception or deal with the stuff that doesn't fit into the normal workflows, or evangelize with the clients, speak to the clients. You're still going to need all those people, and it's still going to be very much, you know, humans communicating with humans, I think. From a sales perspective, we know that people are finding us in different ways now than they did before, right? So people do their research on the internet, on LinkedIn, they read our websites, they look for reviews. That's probably, going to continue to go that way, but you're still going to want to communicate with a person before you start spending serious money, So again, it's going to depend on where you are as a buyer and what you're trying to achieve. But I think we're still going to need people there to certainly manage the more complex situations.
Yeah, perhaps we're going to see a comeback of the human interaction. I can tell you from our own experience, there are some clients of ours we have never spoken to, or perhaps once in 10 years because they didn't pay an invoice, or there was a glitch somewhere. But maybe that's going to change in future. When you have to have some sort of vehicle for establishing trust between parties you don't know. So then. Maybe picking up the phone and talking to someone is going
we're still going to need hairdressers. We're still going to need nurses and plumbers and people to unblock the toilet, and so in situations where you have to be particularly creative or create customized solutions or read a room where you have to kind of assess what somebody thinks about you, or convince a panel of people to select your company, I can see that we're still going to have good communicators and salespeople who are determined to do the job, right? The lead generation part might be more automated, and the content creation might be more automated. But I think we're still going to have people signing the deals. But yeah, we're in an interesting time. Things are changing so quickly. I was reading something like 90% of the world's content has been created in the last 2 years, and we think we're in 2023. If we think of that less than 10% was over the last 2,000 or 4,000 or 6,000 years, it's crazy.
It is.
And again, it makes you think, oh my God, how much of this content is worth creating or worth publishing or localizing?
Yeah, that I think is going to change, because much of the content we see on the internet is driven by Google's algorithm. Because what companies do is they put content on the internet to please the Google algorithm, so that the algorithm will serve content to you if you're looking, I don't know, for vacation in New York.
And also based on if you're paying Google as well, I guess.
If you're paying,
so there's a big business model there.
Yeah. So, but I think ChatGPT is challenging that business model. So in future we may experience search in a different way. And I also read today Elon Musk is also developing his own chat module, or whatever you want to call it. So
there's going to be a lot of
very, very interesting
technologies. And so let's hope we use them for good, for the right reasons and for sensible reasons.
Yeah. Well, I think that sums it up nicely. Thanks again, Robert, for coming in.
No problem. Happy to be here.
And it was great exchanging kicking around some thoughts.
Sure.
And hope we can meet in the future for another.
Absolutely. Happy to do that.
Okay.
Thanks a lot.
Thanks.